My new book, Ellen's Guide to Drawing Shapes, is now available on Amazon. So let's talk about hexagons. In this video, I'm going to show you 3 easy ways to draw hexagons without a compass. I'll also discuss frames, pyramids, towers, and hexagons in perspective. I'm going to show you 3 ways to draw hexagons. This first one I call the radius method, and it takes advantage of the fact that the sides of the hexagon are the same length as the radius of the circle enclosing it. So draw a circle, find a radius, measure its length, and then find that same length going from point 1 to point 2, where both of these points are on the circle. And you can continue around the circle, finding a third point and a fourth point, all the same length. Another way to draw a hexagon I call the clock method, where you start with the circle and divide it into 12 parts, then connect every other number together to form the hexagon. The third way is to start with the square and divide it into 4 parts. Then you get a relatively accurate hexagon. The problem is that the diagonals are longer than the vertical sides. So to make it more accurate, you can move in these vertical sides. Once you have one side of the hexagon, you can find the rest using one of these methods. In the first one, you put the known side in a circle and drop vertical lines from each end of that known side and a horizontal line through the circle. And you can see that that gives you all the corners of the hexagon. Alternatively, you can measure that length with the ruler and then find the next side attached to the first one, the same length, still landing on the circle. And you can continue that around the circle. This works for all regular polygons, that is, all with equal sides. A simple 3D hexagonal form is the plinth or prism, which we see at the base of columns or statues. If there's a hole in it, then it can look like a hexagonal frame or nuts and bolts. Let's draw a plinth or prism. Start with one hexagon, then draw the orange diagonals from each corner of that hexagon, all going in the same direction. And finally, add another hexagon parallel to the first one. I wouldn't start with 2 hexagons because the diagonals may not end up being parallel. Now, drawing a hexagonal frame is tricky. First, start with the small green hexagon, which will be in the back of the form, and it should be parallel to the large green one. Then get rid of all the lines you don't need. And finally, draw the small pink hexagon parallel to the large one, and get rid of all the lines that are hidden. A hexagonal pyramid like this one has a hexagonal base and 6 triangular sides meeting at a point. The front side should be larger than the back sides, and the space in front of the middle green line should be larger than the space in the back. This umbrella is a hexagonal pyramid. When we look down at it from overhead, we see its 6 parts. Notice that the center has moved back, so the front sides are larger than the back sides. If we view it from the side over here, we only see 3 sections, and that's typical of a hexagonal pyramid. Now here are 2 hexagonal towers. Take a look at each of them and see which one looks more angular to you. I think you would agree that this one has more acute or noticeable angles than this one, which looks much flatter. That's because in this one, the corners follow a wider ellipse than this one, which follows a narrower one. To draw a hexagon in perspective, start with a circle and a square, and above it, put an ellipse within converging lines. Then, draw your hexagon in the circle. To find the corners of the hexagon in the ellipse, draw lines from each corner of the hexagon in the circle vertically upward until it reaches the line separating the 2 shapes. Then that orange line converges toward the vanishing point. Where that orange line crosses the ellipse, marks corners of the hexagon in perspective. There are two main characteristics of a hexagon in perspective. First, the lines converge toward a vanishing point. And secondly, although they shrink both horizontally and vertically, the most marked change is in the direction of the vanishing point. So in summary, I showed you 3 ways to draw hexagons. The radius way is the most accurate, while dividing the square into 4 parts is the most inaccurate. I showed you also 2 ways to find the corners of a hexagon when you know one side. And I also showed you how to draw hexagonal frames, pyramids, towers, and hexagons in perspective.